headed here into the near future and beyond. And so joining us to discuss more about that, Jason Sarney here, who's got great articles with Dolphins Wire. He comes up on the show. So we're going to get to the heart of this here, Jason. So obviously some shakeups needed to happen. Number one is I'm happy that the way they went about this. So number one, Chris Greer, he's out. And here's my big thing. I know there's been some draft picks that Chris Greer had addressed, like Jalen Phillips and a couple others. They've been hits. The only issue now is trying to build consistency from Miami. I think Miami is a very good, competent team, but it seems like there's times where I get a little bit of like there's a good week and a bad week. And so we know Mike McDaniel, he's an X's and O's guy, very smart, understands offense. But sometimes it's like there's some of those weeks that you got to get everything up and under control. So even after with Chris Greer, what was kind of the plan with Stephen Ross when setting the tone up from there and what he's trying to now send for Mike McDaniel to make this work and go into next year saying, hey, if we stay competent by the end of the year, we now got to get a competent GM, focus in a lot of those positions that need to be fixed in order for us, because you watched New England last night. That's a team right now that is really shaking things up in the AFC East. What do you make of it?
Well, Jake, first and foremost, appreciate you having me on. Great stuff so far. Thank you very much. Listen, Chris Greer is the common denominator the last 2 decades and change and why the Dolphins have been a playoff winless team since 2001 calendar year. Secondarily, Mike McDaniel is loved by Stephen Ross. There's a lot of confidence that Ross has in McDaniel. And I think what had to happen was you had to let Greer go because of the draft pick hits that he's made, which are kind of few and far between. His major problem was not being able to retain some of those draft picks. The vast majority of those draft picks. Recently, not many have gotten to second contracts. Chris Greer has decided to let guys like Andrew Van Ginkel go, undershoot on an extension for Christian Wilkins, not re-signing a Robert Hunt, a Brandon Jones. That's just kind of recent. And the more egregious part of that was the year after he decided to let these guys go, you look at the weakest positions, and those were the guys. You know, you let a Brandon Jones go, horrible safety unit the year after. You let an interior lineman in Hunt go, ineptitude next to the center on both sides in the Dolphins offensive line. Don't even get me started. Dolphin fans know my proclivity and love for Andrew Van Ginkel, and he was replaced by a guy in Shaq Barrett who didn't even play it down for the Dolphins. So instead of spending $1 million or $2 million more on keeping a homegrown guy like Andrew Van Ginkel, he decided to go get a veteran, almost like they were a team. Oh, we need just one more veteran to go get us a Super Bowl. That's not how you build. You build with keeping guys home, hard-nosed football players who play hurt, play injured. He decided to just let him walk out the door. And the theme with him also is not necessarily who he's picked that hasn't worked out. It's who he's passed on that have become phenomenal football players. And this goes back, Jake, to the 2020 draft. You mentioned earlier the Jets have built all their picks, right?
Yes.
The Dolphins were in their position after they traded Laramie Tunsil, and they got an absolute haul of draft picks for 2 seasons. One of those first-round picks they said goodbye to in Jalen Phillips. But if you really look at the 2020 draft, I mean, it was completely wrong. Now, when I say that, jury could still be a tiny bit out on Tua Tagovailoa. I don't want to go and throw the towel in just yet, but look at the other quarterbacks in that class. We can do a whole other show on that. But the other 2 picks were 2 of the, if not the 2 youngest players in the draft, and Austin Jackson, who has only had 1 good year and hasn't played yet this season pretty much. And then you go with Noah Igbenogany, who they're going to see across the sidelines on Sunday in Madrid, Spain, because he's now a Commander. They could have drafted 1 or 2 offensive weapons for Tua Tagovailoa. Justin Jefferson, Jonathan Taylor, so the passing on certain players, I think, and then not retaining on the hits. Those were the two cardinal sins for Chris Greer, which is why you had to let him go.
It's interesting, and I'm so happy you brought it up because, I started thinking about it. You kind of took the words out of my mouth upon it because I was about to say, even with the draft picks, because that so-called tank for Tua that they were harping on that year before, we remembered how big that was going to be. But, my big thing is, I'm sure you probably have had the reservation for now. But my thought with Tua is, knowing the injury coming out of college, obviously the hip was going to be one of the main concerns, but the size, how he looks in the pocket, and how he would distribute. My big thing about this is Tua, his greatest trait is getting the ball distributed under 2 seconds. We know that for a fact. And it's mostly those little dinks and dunks that you could usually get yards after the catch for. If you got somebody with those cut ranges, like a Jalen Waddle or somebody of that nature. But the thing is like when you think about big play, I know we've seen this all the time, Jason. I don't want to say he can't make the big play. But when I watch him throw, some of his receivers have to stutter step twice in order to just get to the ball. I watched that against that Kansas City playoff game. I watched that multitude of times. When you think about Tua, because the hardest part is Tua going to be that quarterback that you paid X amount of money for that will get you right up and over the hump? He got you a playoff appearance, but it's like, is he the key answer that's going to at least help out with, even with the offense? I love what McDaniel's done with his career because you saw this with Brian Flores. They ain't going nowhere. But with the rejuvenation from there, is that kind of that plan? That they're like, be patient. We've worked and we've rejuvenated his career the way that it's supposed to be. But now is there kind of something in line that they want to add a little more extra? What do you think?
It's kind of a multi-pronged answer here, Jake. First and foremost, when things are absolutely perfect for Tua, he's extremely effective. Going back to 2023, you had an unbelievable dual rushing attack with Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane. Raheem Mostert's breaking records for the Dolphins scoring touchdowns. Tyreek Hill is going off for 1,700 plus yards, and everything was rocking and rolling. Then, unfortunately, you go to last year, injuries happen, ineptitude on the offensive line, and the other prong of this is that I think Tua's hip injury from college is now starting to rear its ugly head again. That is almost like a degenerative kind of injury where people were worried, all right, year 5, year 6, how is he going to be? Is he still going to have that torque to throw long and powerful? Forget like 50-yard throws, which he could do. It's those 15-yard outs that he's got to zip to get there. And he has that ability at times, but the ability that he does not have is like what we're watching Drake May do, is kind of getting outside of the pocket, extend the play, not necessarily, rely only on his arm. But in this day and age, you kind of need that dual threat at quarterback. You need to be able to, improvise, so to speak. He's not an improvisationist. You said it perfectly. 1 to 2 seconds, get it to a spot, let the receivers do their work. That's his quote-unquote superpower. Throw to the spot, faith in the receiver that they'll get there, and then have fun after the catch. If you're asking him to do what most quarterbacks are able to do now, that's when he kind of gets flustered, and that's where you're seeing league leading or second worst in the league interception numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to ask you, though, because one of my biggest thoughts was back into the 24 draft. The Dolphins had the 3rd round pick. My big thing is because with the concussion protocols and then just kind of who Tua is and what his limitations can really hinder him, I felt like, and I was really hoping this would happen with them. Could you have imagined if the Miami Dolphins had drafted Joe Milton? My biggest takeaway with this was he had an accurate arm. We know he can ad-lib at times. And then there was the simple stuff. We know that he needed, consistency. And I think Mike McDaniel is the kind of perfect guy that understands offense, understands quarterback play. I felt like he could control that because let's say if Tua had an apparent injury, because I'll be honest, Jason, these backups that Miami had, it was a toss-up for me. But I felt like with Joe Milton, you could get something competitive in that. And then when he fell to New England, it was like, okay, they got two quarterbacks. One you already know is bound for the future, Drake May. And then all of a sudden, it was like, what do you do about Joe Milton? I felt like, Jason, what do you think? I felt like Joe Milton could have been that perfect answer as a backup plan.
I'm not going to lie to you, Jake. I've had Milton in plenty of those mock drafts from 2024 in like the 6th and 7th round. You know what I mean? Because there would be no problem, and you've seen it in sprinkles. All right, it's 3rd and 15. Bring the kid in. Let him chuck one downfield with that bomb of an arm that he has. Tua doesn't throw a Hail Mary at the end of the second half because if you're 55, 60 yards deep, you can't reach, So that would have been a nice scenario to, put him in as like a relief pitcher for, an inning or two. And when I say an inning or two, a down or two, but the backup quarterback that they've had, I mean, Skylar Thompson was an absolute miss, and then you have to bring in a guy like a Tyler Snoop Huntley, who was a practice squad quarterback. That's who he is. He did okay in a game or two in relief last year. And now, what you had to do was sign a $6 million bust of a first-round, second overall pick of Zach Wilson. They draft Quinn Ewers, which was a nice move, but they should have, knowing that they drafted a guy coming off of injury, knowing that Tua had the limitations, there should have been insurance drafted before a 7th round. Because let's face it, you draft a 7th rounder, you get what you pay for in a Skylar Thompson. If you draft a 6th rounder in Milton, which is where I believe he went, at least he's got that, one tool of a massive cannon for an arm. It's like baseball. You hope to have 2 or 3 tools and develop the rest. Skylar Thompson was just a no-tool 7th round quarterback, and it didn't work. So I agree with you. I would have loved to get back in the DeLorean and go back in time and draft a guy like a Joe Milton in day 3.
Yeah, it's perfect, even with the baseball reference, because here's the thing. The minute that you ain't got your starter and you're having to tap into the bullpen, I mean, if you ain't got a strong enough bullpen for the postseason, you get exposed very easily. My big takeaway of this, Jason, I don't try to throw shade at these organizations because I'm America's honesty mind. I want to be fair with everybody. I can't lie to my audience. But my big thing with Miami, I've said this all the time. Miami, I want to believe in them. But the problem is they feel a lot like the Lamborghini of the NFL, that I don't have enough durability, traction in the tires when I'm facing against a team like New England or Kansas City or a lot of these Midwest, Northeast teams, because when it gets cold, you got to be competitive. You got to have some sort of strength and oomph, even up on the defense. I've heard a lot of, things about Anthony Weaver and what he's trying to do up and onto the defense, but I just don't feel that they have enough of the pieces. Sure, you got Bradley Chubb, who I thought was honestly going to end up getting moved, but without Jalen Phillips, now who you're going to get pressures on? Who are you going to end up relying upon on that? Not just stopping the run. So going into the next year, because they're going to end up accumulating some picks, plus they also got to have the uncomfortable conversations as usual. Where do we now start to go from here? Because the offense, Devin Achane and Jalen Waddle, I think this business with Tyreek Hill's done. I obviously it's done. But now where do you go from here? Let's say you were given the GM job, Jason, what would you address first?
Oh, that's a great question. That's probably one of the greatest questions I'll ever hear, because that's my dream scenario, is to have 5 picks in the top 100 and to be able to either get the guy I want who's there or be the bully at the poker table, move up, move down, get some more, go up and get the guy you want. What I would do is, you're right, Achane and Waddle aren't going anywhere. They weren't going anywhere. Those are the 2 foundational pieces. But what you need to have next to the Lamborghini, I went to school in Buffalo, so I'll take the Lamborghini out in the first month or 2 of the first semester in September and October, but then you need to go to the SUV. You need the Yukon. You need
That's
that
right.
6'3", 6'4", prototypical wide receiver. You need that running back who's, going to get yards after contact. And that's not saying that Achane does not get yards after contact, but the durability can be an issue if you're still relying on him. He's not a big-bodied running back like a Jonathan Taylor. Give me a guy who has that, power mode, who can get me the 2, 3, 4 hard yards on 3rd and short, 4th and inches, even if it's 2nd and 4, and you just want to get another back in there just to pick up the first and then get to the speed guys. They don't have that complement. They had the fun speed in 2023. The wheels kind of fell off last year. And now Tyreek Hill, same idea. He's gone. You're right. We could pretty much say goodbye to him unless a miracle happens. But if I'm going to draft a wide receiver, I want to go up and get it power forward type of a guy, prototypical body. Waddle's phenomenal, but you don't want another Waddle. You want a guy who can completely do different things in the red zone. Bring back the corner fade. Don't throw a fade to Devon Achane against Kyle Hamilton, who's 6'4", against Baltimore. Don't do that. Go up and get a guy who could actually get up the ladder. And if he misses it, it goes into the stands somewhere.
Yeah, and honestly, with the physicality, the one-on-one matchups, and someone that could go up and get it, that would be big, especially when you need the time of possession stuck on your side up on offense. We know right now this division is going to get competitive. We just saw what happened with New England last night. And, I mean, the Jets are the Jets. They're, until they actually have a come-to-Jesus moment, I just don't know what Woody Johnson's going to do with this. And the fact that they're trying to sue the league with these report cards, it's like, what? You expect him to lie? You expect him to, like, not be honest with the way that things have been running? Like, so Miami is looking at, okay, Buffalo, in my opinion, with Sean McDermott, is literally the modern-day Marty Schottenheimer. The fact of the matter is that they can be good, and Josh Allen is literally carrying the load. But the problem is, if defensively, you're a defensive coach, you should hope that in crucial clutch situations, you got to give me some sort of shutdown. You can't just let, a yards after the catch type deal end up now biting you in the closest end of the fourth quarter when you need to win it. You need to shut it down. New England, what a complete 360 turnaround it's been for Mike Vrabel. So Miami is looking at this going, look, the Jets, take that away until they actually figure something out. But Buffalo and New England, those are some two teams we have to get competent with. So with that, are there anybody in mind that you think about as a GM that could be ideal, that works with the mind of someone like Mike McDaniel, and that can bring in exactly as you've mentioned, that could turn around just the look of this franchise and say, look, it ain't just two teams here. You're going to have to add one more here into the list with this division.
I got one guy on the very top of my list, and this is no shade to Champ Kelly, who is the interim right now in Miami. And look, right now it's 50-50 if he's going to retain as the GM and be made the full-time GM, or if they're going to outsource. I'm looking at where it's worked the last several years, and I'm looking at who the best general manager in the league is right now, and Howie Roseman. I want his deputy. I want Alex Halaby. Yep. I literally want to bring the guy in to say, all right, do me a favor. Do what your boss has done.
That's right.
And he could take that blueprint. I mean, look, Howie Roseman is coming off the Super Bowl, and he is never content. He's making deals in the offseason, in the draft, week 2, week 7. He is improving his team whenever he has the ability to do that. That's the kind of guy that I want. And this is a very educated, young kind of guy who I think could mesh extremely well for at least 1 year with Mike McDaniel. Because I've been saying this on the podcast that I do in the Dolphins world. If you're going to bring in a brand new GM, I would be phenomenally thrilled with him or her having the ability to say, I'm going to exit interview or retain interview everybody in the shop. If I want to give Mike McDaniel another year, that's the decision. So that person, whoever they bring in, has to have the 100% autonomy to be the general, keep who he wants, fire who he doesn't, hire the way it's in his image. And if that's what happens with McDaniel and he stays, great. If he wants to start fresh and bring in a brand new crew, fine with that too. But Halaby is the type of guy, if you want to go to Tampa Bay, if you want to go to Baltimore and get those kind of deputies, I'm fine with that as well. But Halaby would be my number one.
So lastly, I know it's kind of early a bit. We're obviously in week 11, and we know we're not even at the tail end of the season quite yet. We still got more games. best draft order for the Dolphins to be in. And with that, where do you see the team finishing? And who would you see that you're seeing in college that's a guy you would want to bring in as the first pick for the Dolphins that can really be the big difference maker of turning this thing around?
That's a great question. To tell you the truth, it can go either way right now. See, the Dolphins could be a couple of games outside of the playoff picture, or they can be a couple of games away from the tankathon, top of the chart. I think they have 3 straight wins in them in Washington. They got a bye week, and then they got the Saints and the Jets. I mean, that's 2 out of 3 at the absolute worst. And the Commanders are hobbled. They're injured. I do see them winning. So it sets up a 6-7 matchup against the Steelers on national television, where if they get to 500, it's going to be the mediocrity all over again with the 13th to 17th pick. To me, I'm not ready to name a guy yet, but I have the positions that I'm focusing in on in the first or second round. The wide receiver that I mentioned, that could be a second round pick, but you need an interior lineman to match up or to be better than who they traded up for to get in Jonas Savaiinaia. The idea was there, but he happens to not be playing very well. Now, the rub on that, too, is that you take a right side offensive lineman and you move him to the left side. That could be a reason why he doesn't look very good. So what I'm trying to do in either the first or second round is get the best pure guard that I can. And if it's a left guard, you move Jonah back to the right side. And if it's a right guard, even better, and you make sure that Jonah just develops, because that still can happen. Other than that, you need a lockdown corner. Oh, my God, Jake, does this team need a lockdown corner? Rasul Douglas is a veteran. He's been playing very well, but he was brought in as a rental, a Band-Aid. They are extremely thin in the secondary. And safety, too. I'd add safety into the mix. So guard, safety, cornerback, tall wide receiver have to happen in those top 5 picks. I'd double up on any one of those positions.
And it certainly is a draft where you got some secondary guys up out there, lots of good names, and man, wouldn't they just be big-time difference makers, especially when you need a shutdown corner type to where even with Buffalo or even with New England, if they decide to end up getting some speedy receivers, you'll want to lock those down pretty quickly. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch with Miami, but great stuff. Jason, absolutely love your work, and I know a lot of our audiences here would love to take a look at it up on Dolphins Wire and your podcast. Tell us more about it and where many of the diehard Miami fans watching today can go and tune into your guys' stuff.
I appreciate this very much, Jake. It was an absolute blast. Yeah, you can check me out on the Fins Faithful on Wednesdays. We do post-game as well. I also jump on Fins TV. Both those guys, Sammy at Fins TV and George over at the Fins Faithful, 2 of my closest friends. They do phenomenal work. So check us out on Fins Faithful Wednesdays, post-game, and also Fins TV on Tuesdays.
I will tell you, though, I'm working hard to getting O.J. McDuffie up and into here because,
one of the best people on the planet.
Absolutely, man. Boy, it would be a blast to have him up and in here. But appreciate you for coming on by, Jason. Fins up, and let's see what the rest of the season gives us here this year. Take care, my friend.
Appreciate you, Jake. Have a great one.
You too. There you go. Yeah, I mean, Miami, there's lots of questions, but hopefully by then we'll get a lot of those answers.